Your trauma didn't break you. It built your most dangerous weapon, awareness. They told you to heal, to forgive, to let go. But here's the truth they don't want you to realize. Your trauma is not something to escape. It's something to use. The moment you stop running from your past, the moment you stop covering your wounds with fake positivity, is the moment you unlock something far more powerful than healing. You unlock dark self-awareness, the kind that sees through people, decodes manipulation, and predicts betrayal before it happens. This is not about moving on. This is about moving forward with your eyes open, sharp, cold, unshakable. Because when you know your pain, when you fully understand what broke you, no one can ever break you the same way again. Part 1. Why healing is a beautiful lie. They told you, you need to let go. They said, forgive them, not for them, but for you. They called it healing. But what if I told you that was part of the trap? A polite, elegant trap designed to make you forget, to disconnect you from the one thing that could make you unstoppable. Your memory, your pain, your awareness. Healing, as they preach it, isn't about freedom. It's about erasing your sharp edges, making you softer, quieter, easier to manipulate. Because a person who remembers every scar, who studies every betrayal, who observes every manipulation without flinching, that person becomes immune, and immunity makes you uncontrollable. Let's be clear, healing isn't wrong. But the way they want you to heal, it's about silence, about moving on before you've even understood what happened, about forgiving people who were never sorry, about suppressing the rage that could have become your greatest insight. True self-awareness begins where healing ends. When you stop asking, why did they hurt me? And start asking, what was their pattern? What did they see in me? What did I allow? You start studying the game, and once you do that, you never play it the same way again. Here's the raw truth most can't handle. You don't heal by forgetting. You heal by remembering so clearly, so brutally, so consciously, that you become untouchable. Because when you remember the structure of the pain, you also remember the structure of power. And from that moment on, you're no longer a victim of the past. You're the strategist of the future. Part 2. The Map of Pain. How trauma reveals the pattern. Pain is not random. Trauma is not chaos. There is always a structure beneath the suffering. You just have to look, coldly, strategically, without emotion. Every betrayal you experienced, every time you were dismissed, abandoned, humiliated, it all followed a pattern. And here's what most people never realize. That pattern wasn't about them. It was about what you didn't see. Because when you're unaware, you repeat the same pain under different names, different faces, same wound. The moment you begin mapping it, tracing it back, you'll see it. The first time you were made to feel small. The second time you were told to stay quiet, not cause conflict. The third time you trusted someone who mirrored love, but delivered control. Different events, same design, and every time your subconscious made a note. But you didn't read it, because you were too busy surviving. Now you're done surviving. Now it's time to decode. Start here. What is your emotional trigger? What kind of people provoke you most? What situations drain you, silence you, destabilize you? The answers are not flaws. They're coordinates, points on the map that lead directly to your inner programming. Because trauma doesn't just hurt, it builds algorithms. It tells your mind, this is normal. This is how love feels. This is what you deserve. And so you replay it. over and over. Not because you're weak, but because your system was programmed by pain. But when you zoom out, when you study it like a war strategist studies the enemy's movement, you stop reacting, you start redesigning. Awareness breaks the pattern. Cold awareness rebuilds it into a weapon, because once you see how it works, you can flip it. They used your triggers against you. Now you use those same triggers to expose manipulation. They mirrored your wounds to control you. Now you mirror their projections to control the frame. Trauma was the blueprint, but now you're the architect. Part 3. Cold self-awareness. Observe without reacting. Most people think self-awareness means being in touch with your emotions. That's surface-level psychology. Real self-awareness, dark self-awareness, isn't emotional. It's surgical. You don't feel the pain. You dissect it. You stop saying, "This hurts." You start asking, "Why did that trigger me? Who benefits from my reaction?" That shift is the beginning of cold awareness. Because let's be real, every time you react emotionally, you lose frame. Every time you explode, explain, or seek validation, you hand over your power. But when you observe without reacting, you become unreadable, untouchable, strategic. Here's how it works. You sense the manipulation, but you don't respond. They expect anger. You give silence. They expect confusion. You stay still. You watch your own pain rise like data, not as an identity, not as a story, just as a signal. You decode people, not through words, but through emotional patterns. What do they try to provoke? Where do they fish for control? What reactions feed their ego? And while they're busy trying to trigger you, you're analyzing the architecture of their entire psyche. Cold self-awareness is not numbness, it's control. Total emotional discipline rooted in brutal clarity. No more, "They hurt me." Just, "They ran pattern X. I used to react with Y. Now I hold frame and respond with Z, or nothing at all." The goal isn't to be emotionless. The goal is to be emotionally weaponized. Your feelings still exist. You just don't let them drive the vehicle. They ride in the back, observed, documented, and restrained, because the moment you can observe your pain without becoming it, you're no longer the player being moved. You're the one moving pieces. You don't fight the game anymore. You run it. Part 4. Weaponize the mirror. Reflect and control. There's a weapon more powerful than words, more effective than confrontation, more precise than aggression. It's the mirror. You don't need to attack people to control them. You just need to reflect them without emotion. Most people live in emotional masks. They act strong, but they're scared. They appear calm, but they're insecure. They pretend to love, but they crave control. And here's what they can't stand: being seen. The moment you hold up the mirror, when you reflect back their exact energy, behavior, or tone, they panic. Because now they have to face themselves. And here's where your trauma becomes a tool. You've been where they are. You've worn those masks. You know that insecurity, that fear of abandonment, that fake confidence. You recognize it not because you judge it, but because you've lived it. And now, instead of reacting, you reflect. When they gaslight, you mirror it with calm confusion. When they project, you echo it back until they lose their own story. When they manipulate, you mirror the structure without the emotional hook, making them feel exposed. The result? They lose balance. They break frame. They retreat or collapse because their tactics stop working. This is psychological Aikido. You don't fight force with force. You absorb it, reflect it, and redirect it. It's not about proving anything. You don't need them to admit the truth. You already know it, and that's why you control it. This is what terrifies manipulators. Not resistance, but reflection. Because a mirror doesn't argue. It doesn't justify, it simply shows. And if you've ever held a mirror to a broken ego, you've seen the meltdown that follows. The stronger your self-awareness, the clearer the mirror. The clearer the mirror, the faster they shatter. But remember, this mirror only works when your emotions are under lock. If you react, they win. If you reflect, they lose. Because when you've turned your trauma into precision, you stop being a target. You become the test. Part 5. Rebuild from ashes. Design a strategic identity. Trauma breaks you, but only once. What happens after that is your choice. Most people try to go back to the old self, back to innocence, back to who they were before the pain. But what they don't realize is this. That version of you was never built to survive. It was soft, open, unprotected. And that's why it shattered. You don't rebuild that version. You replace it by design, not emotion. This is where strategy begins. You don't ask, how do I become happy again? You ask, how do I become unshakable? How do I construct a self that no one can access without my permission? Start with what you've learned. You now see the games. You recognize patterns. You understand your thresholds, your emotional triggers, your previous blind spots. That knowledge is raw power. But power without structure is chaos. So now you build structure. You craft a persona, not a mask, but a framework. A mind that calculates before it reacts. Boundaries that don't explain themselves. Values that aren't negotiable. Silence that speaks louder than defense. You are no longer here to be understood. You are here to be respected. To be read by only those you allow access to move in spaces without giving anyone leverage. And here's the real shift. You stop living for identity. You start using identity as a weapon, custom-built, cold-blooded, purpose-driven. Because when you reconstruct yourself from the ruins, piece by piece with full awareness, you become someone no one remembers. And no one can manipulate again. Not a survivor, a designer, a strategist, a force, final CTA. Your trauma isn't a chapter to close, it's a manual, a code. Once you read it, fully, brutally, without flinching, you stop being who you were. You become something entirely new. You become the one who remembers everything, but doesn't flinch, who sees every emotional game, but doesn't play, who's been burned, but now sets the fire. That's dark self-awareness, not healing, not softness, not forgiveness. It's strategy, it's power, it's control, because now you don't fear being broken again. You've weaponized every piece. They can't use your pain against you, because it's yours now. Sharpened, hardened, owned. And when you own yourself at that level, you become untouchable. But there's one more shift you need to make. If your pain taught you who you are, then your access teaches the world who you've become. Which leads us to the next move in the psychological game. How scarcity creates obsession. How denying access becomes influence. How showing less makes them want more. The next video reveals that strategy in full.